Welcome to the video about Levine, which was done in 2001 and is about cross-cultural altruism. It's the last study that we do in social psychology and is the comparison study with Levine. So Levine is the classic study and Levine is the contemporary study. And Levine is all about looking at how helping behaviour is different across different cultures. So there's a few different theories about why people help. So why people are altruistic. Altruism basically means doing a behaviour which is, you're not going to get a reward for it. You're doing it purely for the good of helping people. Okay, so the first theory is called reciprocal altruism, and that's the idea that you help because you hope that somebody will help you when you need help in the future. The second is called responsibility pro-social value orientation, and that's the idea that we help because of the culture that we're from or the society that we live in. It's an expectation that we should help in certain situations, and so that's how we act. And then there's also social exchange theory, and that's the idea that people help because they want to get something from the person they've helped. And that can be a particular thing, it could be money, or it could just be the praise. Studies into helping behaviour have found that people who live in urban areas are less likely to get help than those who live in rural areas. And that's the idea that people are busier in urban areas, the pace of life is much faster, and they simply don't have time to stop and help people. We all know that idea of like New York and London, that if you need help on the tube, you've got absolutely no chance, and that people will just look away and nobody will make eye contact. We've all seen things like that, you know, memes on the internet and things. So it's this expectation, this stereotype that the bigger the city you're in, the less likely you are to get help, and that's actually backed up by psychological evidence. The other thing that we look at in Levine's study is called collectivism and individualism, and it's the idea that from the society or the culture that you're from, a collectivist society would say that you were for the good of the society, so you help people, or you're thinking about other people rather than just yourself, versus an individualistic society in which people are just thinking about themselves, which is where the stereotype of like New York and London and people don't get help, where that comes from. Before Levine's study was done, there was no study like this done. There was no cross-cultural help and behaviour study done. There have been studies done within different cultures, but there's never been one that has been done across all cultures and then compared. Okay? So, Levine's study had 4 community variables that they are studying. The first was population size, and the idea is that the bigger the population, the less likely you are to get help. The second one is economic well-being. The more money a country has, the less likely you are to get help. The more individualistic people are, the more they're thinking about themselves. The third is cultural values, or sympatia. Sympatia is this idea of, it comes from Latin countries and Spanish countries, and it directly translates as sympathy or liking or affection, and it's this idea that you want accord and you want agreement and harmony within your relationships, and that goes for all relationships, even with strangers, not just people that you're friends and family with. Okay, so they have this cultural expectation that they are trying to get along with everybody rather than just get along with their very close family. Then the fourth community variable that they look at is walking speed, and this is thought to correlate with pace of life. The faster somebody walks, the busier they are, the quicker they are trying to get from A to B. If somebody has a slower pace of life, they're more likely to walk slower and just not be rushing around as much, and therefore they possibly have a little bit more time to help than people who are rushing around and really busy. So there were 3 main goals that Levine wanted to find from this study. The first is helping strangers a cross-culturally meaningful characteristic of a place? i.e., does it define a culture? Okay, is that something that's expected of them? Number 2, does helping strangers vary cross-culturally? Do we all help in the same way, or is it different across different cultures? And then the third is, what are some community characteristics related to helping? 3 theories are tested in Levine. Let's go with Levine. In Levine's study, 3 theories tested. The first is economic expectations. The second is cultural values, sympatia, and the third is cognitive explanations, pace of life. The research method is a cross-cultural quasi-experiment carried out in the field using independent measures. So it's a kind of a mix of quasi-field independent measures, okay? And they did the study in 23 different different cities, including Rio de Janeiro, which is in Brazil, Calcutta, which is in India, Madrid, which is in Spain, Shanghai, which is in China, Budapest, Rome, and New York. So variety of different people living in these cities, different cultures, different races, different economic stability, and they're looking at all these different factors into helping behaviour. They also look at some co-variables in non-emergency situations, and this is how they're actually measuring the helping behaviour. So there's 3 co-variables. Now, because it's a correlation, we have to call them co-variables or variables, rather than saying independent variable, because it's a correlation. So the first co-variable is the victim drops the pen. The second is the victim has a hurt or an injured leg, and the third is a blind victim trying to cross the street. And I'll go into more detail into what they did in these later on. Okay. The way helping behaviour was measured was through the helping rate, which is the overall helping index. Each city is given a score on how likely they are to help. Okay. The 3 measures of helping correlated with statistics reflecting population size, economic well-being, cultural values, and pace of life. So that's everything I've covered so far that they're looking at. The sample comes from the people who are walking around on the street. Okay, so they try to do the study in 2 or more different areas of that city. They tended to do it in downtown areas during the summer. On a clear day, which you're not going to get that here. You'd be very lucky to get a clear, sunny, non-rainy day in the UK. During business hours between 1992 and 1997. So the actual data of the study is quite old, but obviously it's taken a long time for them to collect it and to analyse that data. So for the dropped pen and the hurt leg scenarios, they only approach people who were walking on their own. Children under 17, disabled people, anyone who was carrying a parcel, anybody who looked like they wouldn't be able to help for a particular reason were excluded from the study. Okay. The procedure, how they actually did the study, they collected the data was collected by students who were either travelling or they were returning home from university for the summer. Okay. And all the experimenters were men. So everybody in the hurt leg, the blind condition, the dropped pen, they were all men. Okay. The actual sample was a mix of men and women. So to ensure replicability and standardisation, the experimenters had the same instructions, dressed in a similar way, they practiced together. Okay. So the first co-variable that they're looking at is the dropped pen. And there was a total of 214 men and 210 women who took part in this condition. And the way that they did this was they walked towards a pedestrian in the opposite direction to them, so they'd be going sort of like this. As they got closer to them, they'd drop the pen and carry on walking. And helping behaviour was measured to whether the person who was passing them said, "Oh, hey, you dropped your pen." The hurt leg, there was a total of 253 men and 240 women, so a little bit more than the dropped pen condition. In the hurt leg, they had a very heavy limp, so a very pronounced limp, and a visible leg brace. And what they did was they had a stack of magazines, they dropped them, and then they tried to pick them up, but they were struggling. And helping behaviour was measured to see by whether people helped them pick up the magazines. Okay. The last condition was the blind man condition, and there was a total of 281 trials done. Whether they're split between men and women doesn't say, we're not told that. Okay. The blind man was dressed in dark glasses and held a white cane, and what they did was they stepped up to the sidewalk where they wanted to cross when the light was green. They would put their cane out as if they were going to start walking, and they waited to see if they'd get help. And helping behaviour was measured by somebody who said, oh hey, the light's green, wait, don't cross. Okay. Just to point out, they weren't actually blind, so they weren't actually in any danger of crossing the street and getting run over. Okay, so the results of the study. The most helpful cultures or countries, Rio de Janeiro in Brazil was the most helpful, San Jose in Costa Rica, Malawi, Calcutta in India, and Vienna in Austria. They were the top 5 most helpful countries. The bottom 5, the least helpful, were NYC, Singapore, Amsterdam, Bulgaria, and China. They were the least helpful cultures, okay, or countries. And there were a few correlations in the study that they found, some significant correlations. There was a significant negative correlation between lower economic productivity and higher helping behaviour. Basically, the less money a country had, the more likely people were to help. And that could be because of that individualistic idea of, being for yourself rather than that collectivist idea of, working for helping other people. But there actually wasn't a correlation between collectivist and individualistic societies and helping behaviour. But it could link, there is a link between the money, how much money a country has and how much that help they get. And sympatia countries were more likely to help. So that idea of getting along with everybody, having good relationships with people, there is a correlation there between that and helping people. Okay. So Levine came to the conclusion that helping strangers is a cross-culturally meaningful characteristic. It is part of somebody's culture. How somebody's brought up within that culture determines how likely they are to help somebody. There were large cross-cultural variations between different countries. There's a different expectation within different countries of people helping. And the higher economic productivity, the lower the helping. Okay? But there wasn't a link between collectivism and individualism, but there was a link between those same sympatia countries, so the Latin and Spanish countries like Brazil. They were more likely to help than New York, for example. Okay? So thank you for watching, and I hope that's cleared up Levine's study. And any questions, please let me know. Thank you. Bye.